Welcome to Recovered Space podcast, where we discuss science and real stories of eating disorder recovery. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast. I'm Anastasia, founder of Recovered Space, and I'm thrilled to be co-hosting this podcast with Dr. David Garner, a leading expert in eating disorder recovery field with over 40 years of experience. Welcome, David. Glad to
Thank
have you
you.
here.
Good to be here.
And today's episode is especially relevant as we head into the holiday season. Time of the year filled with celebrations, family gatherings, a lot of joy, and of course, food-centered events. And for some of us, this time of the year can be quite challenging because it can trigger some of the issues and concerns we have around food and with our body image. And so today, Dr. Gardner, I would like us to discuss some practical ways to maintain mental well-being and balanced approach towards food and body image as well during this time of the year. And to start, let's talk about why the holiday season can be particularly challenging for people who are suffering from disordered eating and who's got some concerns about their body image.
It's really important to point out that holidays can be very stressful for a number of reasons. I mean, you have large numbers of family members oftentimes getting together, and there may be very complex relationships amongst people within the family. So when family dynamics tend to come to light and in a much more significant manner during holidays than they might at other times. Also, people with disordered eating are confronted by oftentimes huge amounts of food, many food choices, that combined with family interactional issues that may be important really may set the occasion for much higher stress during the holidays. Also, I guess it's important to point out that the holidays are stressful even if you don't have disordered eating. So holidays can be stressful. They can be very wonderful, but they can also be stressful. People with disordered eating, though, are oftentimes kind of finding themselves parachuted into an environment where other people are very aware of their eating problems. So in addition to the normal dynamics that exist and the tremendous amounts of choices that are available, you oftentimes then feel that family members are having various reactions to your disordered eating and what they think is you should be doing during the holidays. So it puts a lot of pressure on somebody with disordered eating.
And one thing that I assume can be particularly challenging is dealing with the comments from family members about whether the way you eat, how much you eat, or how little you eat, or the way you look. Dr. Gardner, do you have any advice or idea how someone can set healthy boundaries in these circumstances?
Well, it's first of all important to understand that many times people's comments or concerns really are meant to try and be helpful, even though they're not helpful. So having a bit of compassion for people's concerns around you, I think, is helpful from the beginning. But also understanding that people sometimes have inappropriate comments that they can make about you and your behavior, which really wouldn't be tolerated by most other people. So maybe they're trying to be helpful, but I think it's important for you to be able to let people know that you're trying to follow your recovery plan and that their comments are not really that helpful. I mean, so I think being able to set boundaries about what people should talk about. Please don't talk about my eating, or please do not tell me to eat differently than I'm eating. I'm assuming that somebody who has disordered eating is trying to engage in recovery. So they have a recovery plan. That recovery plan should not be altered by parents, friends, or family making comments about eating. They're not professionals. They also are probably not well informed about how to go about dealing with this. So be compassionate and understand that they're trying to be probably helpful, do the best that they can, and also set boundaries for yourself about not asking people, please, let's not comment about my eating.
Yeah, it's a good advice. What helped me when I was in my recovery, I prepared a few phrases beforehand. Like I was expecting that some comments can pop up, even though these people had the best intentions in mind. They had no idea whatsoever how to deliver those worries properly and not in a hurtful way. So what I did, I just prepared a few statements like, I feel like I don't want to talk about this. Please, let's change the subject. And that worked out well.
And it's also important to understand that sometimes your disordered eating may be something that is kind of being publicly displayed. And so, in a way, although you want to set clear boundaries, it's important also to be realistic about the kind of worry and fear that your behavior may generate with people, with family or loved ones. For example, if you sit down at a Christmas dinner and eat twice as much as anybody else, then quickly get up and go to the bathroom, that obviously is something that isn't private. People are aware of what's going on. So, in one sense, by telling them to not bother you or and not be aware of it, it's kind of like saying, really close your eyes, don't pay attention to reality. And so it's important, it's a very delicate balance. On the one hand, you want to set boundaries, but the other hand, if your behaviors are really public displays of difficulties, then of course people are going to react. So if at Christmas dinner you don't eat anything, or if you have kind of one piece of asparagus while other people are eating, well, that's a public display of something that is concerning and distressing to other people. So of course they may not say anything, but I'm not sure whether them not saying anything or actually saying something that is thought, which one of those is the best option. One involves setting boundaries where maybe they're artificial because it's a public display of disordered eating, or should they not say anything, or should they say anything? I don't think there's any kind of a prescription that fits all circumstances. But understand, A, set boundaries, but B, also be realistic and try, if you can, to inhibit making a public display of your problems. I think
Right.
that's important.
I believe for many of us, these holidays gatherings are filled with lots of tempting foods that sometimes can feel a bit off limit, can bring a lot of anxiety. And I believe my question, if you have any advice or tips or tools, how we can handle and manage this, a high level of anxiety around food choices.
Okay, that's a really good question. I think one of the ways of doing this would be to find out what the menu is going to be in advance, what the foods are, and then try and come up with an eating plan in advance. It's very hard to kind of, in the midst of all of this food, to be making food choices without any forethought, because either you may eat too much and feel guilty or feel badly, eat too little, create concerns amongst all of your relatives. So if you can come up with a food plan, which would, I guess the best way of describing it would be to approximate normalcy. Say for this occasion, maybe later on I'll go into, when I'm by myself, I'll do other things. But with this public situation, what about coming up with a plan which involves me eating maybe all of the foods in moderate amounts, which will definitely not precipitate, overwhelming guilt necessarily, because I'll know it's, normal, and it won't also appear weird. So, can you come up with a meal that if somebody didn't have an eating disorder, they might consider this to be a normal meal? One of the ways of doing this is yoking it to somebody else who's not a dieter and not an overeater at your table, to be able to have exactly the food they have. So they're having a piece of turkey that looks like it's about 3 ounces in size. You have a piece of turkey 3 ounces in size. If they have one scoop of mashed potatoes with gravy, that's exactly what you have. So what you can say is, listen, I'm yoking myself to a non-eating disordered individual for one meal because I want to do it for two reasons. One, I want to pursue normalcy and health. And number two, I don't want to be weird at the table, because that can create problems. So I like that approach because it's a little bit better than saying mind your own business, because to say to mind your own business is somebody when you're behaving really strangely, well, that's a bit over the top. Also, to tolerate people's comments, because there'll be people around who might comment regardless of what you do because of the concerns that they have about your disordered eating. So rather than those two approaches, which may set either artificial boundaries or become too lax, to try and either plan in advance exactly what you're going to consume or yoke yourself to a non-disordered eating person around the table. Those are two approaches which I think balance out the setting boundaries and also not setting boundaries when your behavior is somewhat unusual. Again, you can't expect people to not react to you if you're doing something that is really unusual, just like you would react to your aunt or somebody else at the table if they started engaging in some unusual behavior.
I probably would like to add that what helped me previously, I tried to stick to the main rules of meal planning, which is spreading out your meals throughout the day. So I try to still have my main meals and snack in between. So I didn't feel extremely hungry before the main dinner or the main gathering, because if I didn't eat normally beforehand, that would provoke my potentially binge episode. So again, speaking from my personal experience, trying to stick to the same eating pattern that you hopefully have now if you're in recovery, or you're trying to follow because you are thinking about recovery, meaning like spreading your meals throughout the day, can also probably be helpful in managing this potential choice paralyze. Next question, which is reasonable to discuss for us, it's about exercise, because I believe for many people who are struggling with disordered eating, they can have an idea that they have to compensate the amount of food they ate, like that night or that a few days in a row, by excessive exercising or by just doing extremely long walks or whatever, with the hope that this will offset, their yesterday's or 2 days ago meals. So, what's your take on this?
Okay, I guess it's a really good question. I guess my thinking about this is, first of all, it's important to understand that actual exercise, unfortunately, is not a great way to compensate for eating. So the best reason for exercise is health. And during the holiday season, I guess one of the things that might be reasonable is to try and see if you can't have clear boundaries on your eating, so you're not engaging in disordered eating, not overeating or undereating, but picking, as we mentioned in the last question, kind of a clear plan about eating. And then the exercise during the holidays, at least for this, I guess I'm arguing kind of for family harmony here. And so if you, after, if it's a family holiday and you're with your family and friends, but you go out and run a marathon, well, you're going to be 4 or 5, 6 hours outside of the family environment. It doesn't involve anything interpersonal at all. It involves you desperately seeking to try and reduce the calorific effects of eating by engaging in excessive exercise. So what I think would be preferable is, what about exercise for the holidays to involve going for a walk with your favorite family member? I mean, that's exercise. It's also social. It also might be enjoyable. It may take your mind off of these things. If you have a reasonable amount of food, you don't need to compensate for it. So the best advice is exercise as part of a family gathering if you can. Trying to spend time with people being active. There's, you don't have that many holidays over a lifetime. Now, again, not all families are harmonious. Some families fight like crazy during holidays. Well, I'm recognize that may be the case, but if you can try and leave your eating disorder to some degree outside the boundaries of the holiday, there might be some advantages, both in terms of your own mental health as well as the mental health of people around you. So trying to exercise is bad as a compensatory behavior in terms of its effectiveness. And also, it may have interpersonal consequences if it's excessive. So try and keep moderate physical activity, hopefully with people.
Right. So I really loved you saying just try to act out during the holiday season as if you don't have dessert eaten, and that just hit me. You can actually have holiday from your disordered eating.
It's a good way of thinking about it.
Probably this idea of trying to have a bit of the holiday from your not very healthy eating patterns or exercise patterns and everything when you are with your family, it can be also very healing. So probably someone will find out.
I really like that idea. I have one coaching client who was actually really good at, even though I had pretty serious eating problems. She would, when she was around family or a family event like this, she did yoke eating to other people, and it was interesting how she felt that really improved the family relationships that she felt positively about and cherished. So she made an effort, and I like the example of, let's take a holiday from my disordered eating, and I can get back to it later if I insist,
Mm-hmm.
because it also can teach you something.
Yes, like
It can
take it
teach you
as an
something.
experiment. Like
Mhm.
be curious about this. Just act as a science. Like if you're here with us as a scientist, you know everything about experiments. So I just want to encourage people, to put this hat on as a science and see how it this approach can make you feel. Nothing bad can happen, just be curious.
Yeah, and
Probably help.
again, no matter what happens, it's not going to make a major difference in your weight. If
Exactly.
you're eating, if you're doing the kinds of things that I just mentioned. So take a holiday, and interesting because you can maybe determine that holiday should be turned into a long-term vacation. I'd be very interested in people during the holidays to see how this works and get some specific feedback from listeners about how this worked and what were some of the problems with it too. I mean, maybe you can go in with a really good plan about how to address the holidays, and then where did it go off the rails if it did?
Right. And now, Dr. Garner, let's talk about the emotional side of the holiday. Of course, hopefully, that 90% of the time together with your family is filled with joy, excitement, fun, and peace. But I would assume that sometimes being just around your family can trigger some things, can trigger some probably traumatic experience, can trigger just your old habits and old behaviors. And my question is, do you have any advice on how someone can handle these difficult emotions if they arise without turning to food to comfort people?
Well, first of all, it's important to emphasize that family gatherings can be highly emotional and quite turbulent, even if you don't have an eating disorder. I mean, my family, nobody had an eating disorder in my family, and it was chaos. And it was, I mean, every emotion that you can imagine came flowing out from every individual in the room. So, and there was no eating involved at all. It was just a very emotional, very disruptive, very turbulent period. So, first of all, understand that can happen. And I think that the best thing that you can do is to understand, to try and deal with the emotions that occur, and to simply have food get involved with that creates another level of problems. You already have problems. It's already an emotional experience. And then if food gets involved with this, either by feeling that you must overeat or somehow distract yourself away by food, then it just adds an additional complication to an already difficult situation. So I'd say the best advice is to stick with the emotions that you're experiencing. And then if the emotions are too strong or too intense, perhaps to extract yourself from that family environment for a period of time. I actually found that reading was very helpful. So listening to music, so extracting yourself and then doing something that's different that maybe commands your attention other than eating. Well, I do have a really good recommendation, but I have to get this as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have a chaotic family
Uh-huh.
and it's very highly emotional, kind of the best therapeutic advice here.
I love that.
Okay, that will work. Okay, it's not food,
Yeah.
but it's actually quite helpful. You can put these in and you can listen to your favorite music. And again, dealing with the very emotional outside world, you can actually turn inward to do something that's soothing and something that is helpful to you.
I love it. I really love it. I believe this is it for this episode, Dr. Gardner. Is there anything else you would like to add in this context that probably didn't ask you or and worth touching on?
Well, I think that the major points are to have a plan. That's one major point in conclusion. The other thing, perhaps, is to make sure that you understand both the personal as well as the interpersonal kind of implications of engaging in symptoms. And that's critical, I think. And understanding that you don't have that many holidays in your lifetime. So try, and I've argued for this idea of family harmony if possible. And if it is chaotic and conflicted and all kinds of problems, and trying to distract yourself or to try and break up the numbers of people into the friendly people that you can have a reasonable conversation with, and to try and spend time with them as opposed to trying to get into battles and tug of wars with the more argumentative people in your family.
Cannot agree more. And thank you so much, Dr. Gardner, for this nice conversation. And we hope that these insights and tips will help you to enjoy holidays at the best of your ability and still be confident, mindful, and self compassion. So, wishing you all great holiday season. Please take care and see you all soon.
Perfect. Bye bye.